Today's video is done in collaboration with Middle-earth strategy battle game's new expansion, The Rise of Angmar. Sauron has been in hiding for over 1,000 years, since his defeat at the hands of the Last Alliance and the taking of his One Ring by Isildur. As he works to regain his strength in the fortress of Dol Guldur, his greatest servant brings about his own realm, a realm to destroy a kingdom of men. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the history of Angmar. Nearly 500 years before the kingdom of Angmar would rise, the seeds of Arnor's downfall would be sown. After the death of King Eärendil, the kingdom of Arnor would be split into three. The largest of these splinter kingdoms is Arthedain, ruled by the eldest son and rightful heir, Amleth. The two younger sons established the kingdoms of Cardolan and Rhudaur. Often strife would arise among the three kingdoms, in part because the kings of Cardolan and Rhudaur wished to control the Weather Hills and especially the watchtower of Amon. Arthedain not only possessed Weathertop and its Palantir, but also the other two Palantiri of Arnor at Annúminas and the Tower Hills. Over the centuries to come, the line of Isildur would fail in Cardolan and Rhudaur. The once great kingdom is divided and weakened. It is in this environment that a new kingdom rises in the north, the Kingdom of Angmar. This realm lies north of the Etten Moors, just south of the mountains that would bear its name. While most prominently to the west of the Misty Mountains, it would stretch to the east as well. The Witch King's capital fortress is Carn Dûm, though his kingdom would also possess the once great dwarven mountain of Gundabad. In 1349, the kingship of Arthedain passes to Argaleb I. With the failure of the line of Isildur in the other realms, Argaleb claims kingship over all Arnor. While Cardolan accepts this decree, Rhudaur resists. It turns out an evil lord of the Hillmen, who had seized control of Rhudaur, had formed an alliance with the Witch King. In response, Argaleb fortifies the Weather Hills, but in a subsequent battle between Arthedain and Rhudaur, Argaleb is killed. His son, Arvaleg I, drives the enemy forces back from the hills with the aid of both Cardolan and Lindon. Sometime after this, the Witch King would set his sights upon the elves, laying siege to Rivendell. However, Elrond would be reinforced by Lothlorien and would subdue the forces of Angmar for a time. Finally, in 1409, the Witch King would launch a great assault upon Arnor. He crosses the river with a great host, entering Cardolan and surrounding Weathertop. Most of Cardolan would be ravaged during the Witch King's march through the lands. In the battle at Amon, the Dunedain are defeated and King Arvaleg is slain. Amon is burned and razed, and the Great Watchtower is reduced to ruins. However, the Palantir is saved and carried back to Fornost, now the capital of Arthedain. Not only would Arvaleg die in this encounter, but so would the last prince of Cardolan. He would be buried at Tirn Gorthad, or what would later be known as the Barrow-downs. It was here that a remnant of Dunedain had held out against the forces of Angmar. Centuries later, the hobbits would become trapped in the very grave of this fallen prince. There they would find daggers of Westerness, blades the Arnorians made for fighting against Angmar and its king. With Arvaleg slain, the kingship has passed to his 18-year-old son, Arafor. Despite his young age, Arafor leads his people to repel the enemy forces, with the help of Círdan and the elves of Lindon. For a time, Angmar would once again be subdued by the elves of Lindon and Rivendell. During this time, the hobbits who had dwelt in the Angle, between the rivers Horwell and Loudwater, fled the dangers posed by Angmar, some going south and then back to the Gladden Fields, while others head west. In total, Arafor would rule Arthedain for 180 years, and no further attacks from Angmar would come during his reign. In 1601, the hobbits would migrate further west, and Arafor's son, King Argaleb II, gives them the land of the Shire, which had previously been his hunting grounds. While Argaleb would not experience attacks from Angmar, he would lead Arnor through the Great Plague, which ravages the lands of Eriador in 1635. Most of the men of Cardolan are wiped out as a result of this terrible plague. The hobbits and other areas of Eriador are affected as well, but it was less impactful in the northern parts of Arthedain. Still, the loss of the Dunedain of Cardolan would create a great advantage for the Witch King. Seizing upon the weakened realm, he sends evil spirits out of Angmar and Rhudaur. These spirits come to the Barrow-downs, where they would inhabit the bones of the Dunedain buried there. Thus, the Barrow-wights, terrors of Tern-Gorthad, are created. For over 200 years, Angmar would be held in check. The next battle we find recorded comes in 1851, where King Araval, along with the aid of Lindon and Rivendell, wins a victory over Angmar in the lands of Cardolan. Despite the victory, they are unable to wrestle control of Cardolan from the Witch King. During this same time, Gondor is experiencing attacks by the Easterlings. It is Araval's son, Arafant, who realizes that these attacks upon the once united kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor are all coordinated by a single power. However, it's likely he did not know the source. The single power was none other than Sauron himself. Arafant seeks to renew the once great alliance of men, and in 1940, his son Arvedui marries Firiel, the daughter of Gondor's king, Ondoher. An interesting note on Arvedui: his name actually came courtesy of one of his father's counselors. This counselor is remembered as Malbeth the Seer, for he was gifted with foresight and was known for proclaiming two great prophecies. The first is telling Arafant to name his son Arvedui, meaning last king. Arvedui you shall call him, for he will be the last in Arthedain, though a choice will come to the Dunedain, and if they take the one that seems less hopeful, then your son will change his name and become king of a great realm. If not, then much sorrow and many lives of men shall pass, until the Dunedain arise and are united again. The second prophecy of Malbeth would be fulfilled over 1,000 years later, when Aragorn, son of Arathorn, takes the Dimalt Road, summoning the army of the dead to fulfill their broken oath. 4 years later, Ondoher and his two sons are killed in the disaster of the Morannon, a devastating loss to the Easterlings. With no king or direct heir, Arvedui claims the throne of Gondor, seeking to fully reunite the kingdoms once more. However, the lords of Gondor would instead choose Eärnil II, Ondoher's distant cousin, as their king, not wishing to hand the throne to the line of Isildur, but to keep it with the line of his brother, Anarion. Still, the two kingdoms' strengthened relations would continue. Arvedui himself comes to Arnor's kingship at his father's death in 1964. Just 9 years later, Arvedui learns of Angmar's preparing for its greatest assault yet, an attack meant to strike down Arnor once and for all. Arvedui sends word to Eärnil. Angmar is preparing its final assault. Arnor calls for aid. The very next year, the power of Angmar had arisen once again, and the Witch King comes down upon Arthedain that winter. The Arnorians make a great stand at their capital of Fornost, alongside their elven allies and 500 hobbit archers from the Shire. The might of Angmar is too great for Arthedain to withstand the onslaught. The capital of Fornost is captured, and most of the surviving Dunedain are driven over the river Lune. Among those retreating here are King Arvedui's sons. As for the king himself, he would hold out upon the North Downs until the end of all hope. Finally, he would escape north with some of his guard. Thanks to the swiftness of their horses, they escape the forces of Angmar. Out of the fall of Fornost, Arvedui rescues the two Palantiri in his care, those previously of Anúminas and Amon Sul. Arvedui comes to the far north end of the Blue Mountains. hiding in tunnels of abandoned dwarven mines. However, starving, they would travel north into Forodwaith, seeking the help of the Losoth, also known as the Snowmen of Forochel. The Losoth are initially hesitant to aid the king out of fear of the Witch King, saying the great servant of Sauron would make frost or thaw at will. However, seeing the gaunt king and his men, and out of fear of their weapons, they give them a small amount of food and build snow huts for them. Arvedui is forced to await help from the south, for their horses had perished. Meanwhile, the Witch King takes up residence in Fornost, filling it with evil folk, and war sweeps over the lands of the once great kingdom. Most of the hobbits go into hiding. In the west, Arvedui's son, Aronarth, would tell Círdan of his father's fate, and the great shipwright sends a ship out from the Grey Havens and north to the Bay of Forochel. In March of 1975, the ship arrives at the bay, but the snowmen were uneasy, for they said that they smelled danger in the wind, and the chief of the Losoth said to Arvedui, "Do not mount on this sea monster. If they have them, let the seamen bring us food and other things that we need, and you may stay here till the Witch King goes home, for in summer his power wanes, but now his breath is deadly, and his cold arm is long." However, Arvedui ignored this counsel. He thanks the Losoth chieftain, giving him a ring, an heirloom of his ancient line, the Ring of Barahir. He boards the ship, seeking to set out. However, the Losoth was correct in his assessment, for the ship would not even reach the open sea before a windstorm comes forth, bringing blinding snow out of the north. The ship is driven back upon the ice, crushing the hull. Thus, Arvedui, the last king of Arnor, is lost in the sea, along with the two Palantiri. Later that very year, Gondor would answer the call for aid. King Eärnil II sends his son Prince Arnor north with a great fleet. After sailing down the Anduin and upon the Great Sea, they would come to the Grey Havens. It was said so great was their force that the harbors of both Harlond and Forlond could barely contain all the Gondorian ships. We are told there was joy and great wonder among not only the men, but also the elves, and from them descended an army of power, with munition and provision for a war of great kings. Or so it seemed to the people of the north, though this was but a small sending force of the whole might of Gondor. But it was not just the Gondorians who came to stand against the Witch Kingdom of Angmar, for the most praised of all this force was the horses. These great animals came from the Vales of Anduin, with riders tall and fair, proud princes of Rhovanion. Indeed, this most likely means the ancestors of the Rohirrim once fought the Witch King in the lands of Eriador. Bolstered by their southern allies, the remnants of the north would seek to strike back. Círdan summons the elves from his own lands, and the mannish remnants of Arthedain. This host marches across the river Lune, making their way toward the Witch King. However, news of this host comes to the Lord of the Nazgul, but in his pride, he waits not for the attacking force to come to his fortress. Rather, he rides out to meet them, seeking to drive them back into the Lune. However, this host of the west comes out of the hills of Evendim, resulting in a great battle on the plain between Nenúiel and the North Downs. The battle goes poorly for the Witch King, and his forces are already retreating back to Fornost when a second host arrives. Little did he know that the Dunedain had sent the main body of the horsemen around the hills. They charge from the north, descending upon the forces of Angmar, and the battle is a rout. The Witch King, gathering all fighters he could from the disaster, flees northward toward Carn Dûm. Yet before he could reach his fortress, the cavalry of Gondor catches up to him. Meanwhile, Glorfindel leads a host of elves out of Rivendell, wiping out yet more of the orcs. It is said that then so utterly was Angmar defeated that not a man nor an orc of that realm remained west of the mountains. Seeing his imminent defeat, the Witch King rides up, black robes and black masked, upon a black horse, and fear fell upon all who beheld him. He singles out Arnor for the fullness of his hatred, and with a terrible cry, he rides straight at the Prince of Gondor. While Arnor would have withstood the Nazgul, his horse would not. The horse flees, carrying Arnor far away before he can master the beast. Then the Witch King laughed, and none that heard it ever forgot the horror of that cry. But Glorfindel rode up then on his white horse, and in the midst of his laughter the Witch King turned to flight, and passed into the shadows. For night came down on the battlefield, and he was lost, and none saw whither he went. Returning to the battlefield, Arnor wishes to chase after the Witch King, but is held back by Glorfindel. Do not pursue him. He will not return to this land. Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man will he fall. This is the very prophetic statement that Eowyn, with the help of Merry, would one day fulfill. Thus falls the kingdom of Angmar. His forces defeated, the Witch King flees to Mordor, where he would summon the other Nazgul, preparing for the return of Sauron. The men and orcs of Angmar, east of the Misty Mountains, are left without their master. Hearing of the Witch King's defeat, the Eotheid, ancestors of the Rohirrim living in Rhovanion, travel north and drive away the remnants of Angmar. These horse lords would settle these very lands in the upper vales of Anduin, marking the end of the kingdom of Angmar. Ever after, the Witch King would harbor a hatred for Arnor, and would one day bring about the king's end, and the end of his line. While his own kingdom would fall, the Witch King would succeed in bringing about the downfall of Arnor, reducing its people to rangers wandering the wild. Yet from this very line, the line the Witch King failed to destroy, the kings of Gondor, and indeed the realm of Arnor itself, would rise again. If you would like to live out the remnants of Arnor holding out in Eriador, or perhaps be the Witch King seeking to destroy the world of men, check out our friends at Middle-earth Strategy Battle Game. The new Rise of Angmar expansion is super fun and has a lot of great deep-cut book characters and creatures, as well as some original ones to flesh out the story. And special thanks to the folks at Games Workshop for letting us incorporate some photography of their awesome miniatures into today's special video. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.